Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Satish Agnihotri, Mr. Ravi Pandit, Mr. Ramesh Kaimal, Mr. Sunil Jain, Mr. Ashish Khanna, and Mr. Prayag Sharma, and of course the audience. It's really a privilege and honor for me to be here with all of you today. And I'll just begin by sharing a brief overview of Rockefeller, since Mr. Agnihotri remembers our history quite well. So I'll just go back to not 2 centuries, but just the 100 years that we've been around. And our mission is really to promote the well-being of humanity throughout the world. The way we try to achieve our mission is through 2 important goals. One is really to be seeing how we can advance inclusive economies by expanding opportunities for shared prosperity. So that's the first goal. The second important goal is really to see how we build resilience. And resilience at 3 levels, really, at the level of the individual, community, as well as at a systems level, so that we can really help people to be able to be better prepared, be able to manage, and be able to actually get out of the crises and shocks which have become part of daily routine now. So in terms of how do we really address these 2 goals, we look at a cross-section of 4 important sectors. So we've done quite a bit of work around advancing health. We've been working around securing livelihoods, revaluing the ecosystem, and of course advancing cities. Typically the way the Rockefeller Foundation works is to really look at what are the big problems out there and how do we create systemic change. As you all know, we started off with the global impact investing, and I'm not going to get into that, but that's something that Rockefeller really initiated, and that has really become a movement in itself. In India, we've also been working around the 100 resilient cities, and some of the cities in India actually are part of it and went through a very, very competitive process. I know recently I met the Pune Municipal Commissioner, who's very excited about being part of it. Let me now zoom into what we're doing in the renewable energy space. So we have the Smart Power for Rural Development Initiative, which is a $75 million initiative that the foundation has invested. And basically what we're really trying to do is to come out with a model which is sustainable, because I think that's really critical before we start talking about scale. Our overall goal is to really have 1,000 mini-grids, and I'll come back to why we decided on mini-grids. But we really want to have 1,000 mini-grids operational, and we want to really touch about 1 million lives through these mini-grids. When we started looking at the energy access issue across the world, and particularly in India, even today we have over 237 million people who don't have access to energy. And we really wanted to not just limit our program around providing access to lighting, but for us, if we were really looking at truly being honest to the goal of economic development, using energy for productive use was very, very critical. And that's why we really landed at the mini-grids, where we're building up 30 kilowatt plants. They are solar plants, hybrid, as well as biomass. And we are working in remote parts of India, and we've picked up, of course, the most difficult states. So we are working in UP, Bihar. We've recently expanded in Jharkhand as well, and we will be expanding in Orissa. We launched this program a year ago, and I'm very proud to say that we have 100 mini-grids operating on the ground. We have 7 energy-serving companies that are actually running these plants, so those plants are not run by us. And we have over 28,000 customers. And I think going back to your point, Mr. Agnihotri, really keeping the consumer in mind, how do we really we can design whatever we want to design, but at the end of the day, how do we keep their aspirations in mind is really important. So coming back to, how did we really work around this problem and understand this space? So we were really looking at a marketable solution, and we spoke to the private sector. So there were 4 important issues that came out. The first one was around financing. There isn't much financing which is available to them. The second important area was really around government policies, because again, you invest, mini-grids are not cheap, and if you're making that investment, what happens to the assets, what happens to tariff feed-in policies, etc. So they had a lot of questions around government policy, and I'm talking about a year and a half ago. The third important area was really around, they did have confidence that rural consumers would have the possibility to pay. They hadn't really interacted with rural consumers, and they really needed help from site selection to project development to ramping up demand, etc. And the fourth important area was innovation, because again, we all know that with the mini grid, the battery costs are high, the capex costs are high, and we really have to be looking at innovative ways to really reduce the capex costs. How do we look at batteries? How do we look at smart meters, et cetera, which is still costing quite an exorbitant amount? And also innovation in terms of processes, like you were talking about. How do we really have platforms that are really giving us the right information at the right time? So in order to address this, what we've done is, for the number of plants that we have on the ground and what we are going to be doing as we scale up, we as Rockefeller are providing debt financing. We also have been working very closely with government, and we're really happy in terms of the progress that has been made on all fronts, whether it's a national tariff policy, is the national draft mini grid policy, which is going to be announced very soon, as well as UP being the first state which already has a mini grid policy, and other states such as Bihar coming forward to do something similar. The third important area, as I told you, was the private sector was really looking for a one-stop shop. How do we kind of get all the wraparound services, whether it's site selection, whether it's knowledge management, whether it's building up demand. So we have been able to set up a subsidiary company of Rockefeller here, which is Smart Power for India. I think all of you have probably seen the newsletter which is around. And this is really a company now which is about a year old, which is providing all these services to the private sector. And for the innovation piece, we are working very closely with Institute for Transformative Technologies and Tata Trust to really look at how do we grapple with the issues around the capex costs as well as the processes around data management. Having said that, I think what we've also been able to do, even though it's early days, we're really truly interested in the impact of our work. So both at the economic level as well as at the social level. So we are kind of making sure that we have plant level information. So at any point of time, whether it's in Delhi or in Bangkok or New York, we are really able to see how many customers do we have, what's the kind of tariff, what's the downtime, how much diesel is being used, how is the business model working in terms of IRR, et cetera. So that's really been important. We also have been able to build out a spatial analysis. So we are looking at issues around inclusion, gender very, very closely. So how are the mini grids being laid out? So for example, I don't have any issues because we really want to share our good and bad experiences. We were working at a cluster where you had 600 households. Now typically there were 300 households that were coming from really underserved populations. When the mini grid was laid out, there were only 30 households from the underserved populations which actually came into this catchment area. And actually, when you went on to looking at the numbers of customers, there were just 12. So I think, we're looking at this information very, very closely. A, having the ability to capture this kind of data, and then B, saying, what is it that we need to do differently if we truly want to be addressing inclusion and gender issues. So I think we are at that point where we have this data, and we're really trying to see how that gets incorporated into the business model, and we can really look at scale. So we're beginning to see more energy-serving companies coming to this space. We're beginning to see government now looking at the mini-grid space much more seriously and having an enabling environment. So I think, I know I'm running out of time. I can see your signal. But I think where we are today in the last, when I look at the journey over the last 12 months, I think it's really exciting to see how in 3 months' time, Smart Power India is able to get energy, not just for lighting, but for productive use. So right from the time, these 3 months include getting land selected, getting the plant up and running, and getting the connection. So I think that's really noteworthy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.